Phil Sheridan writes for ESPN.com. He's been covering the Eagles. Billy's been covering the Eagles since Phil, is it 84 or 85?
85 was my first year.
That's before you've been born, right, Josh?
I was born in 85.
Not to make you feel old, Phil.
Believe me, I started out the morning feeling pretty old, so just only piling on. That's okay.
Phil, I just have one quick question before we get started about the Eagles. Phil, how hot is it up there at practice?
Oh, it was brutal last week or so. I mean, it was really, really crazy, and it actually affects everything. Like in terms of covering the team, you get a little bit of time with these guys as they come off the practice field. And for the most of the last week, guys were just like basically rushing from the practice field to get into the air-conditioned building. So there wasn't much chance to actually stop anybody or talk to them. So it was really pretty strange. But it was intense. They had these huge, like, misting fans, like kind of blowing watery mist out, and a few guys would take advantage of that and stuff. But for the most part, the sun's just beating down, and it was pretty unforgiving.
Phil, you were one of the guys who was standing around when Lane Johnson was speaking to everybody over on Saturday, and it seems at this point, over the last 8 days, this narrative with Lane Johnson has changed numerous times. It's literally turned into, I feel like, a soap opera saga. I want to get your impressions of what really is the truth and what is not the truth with this whole Lane Johnson situation.
I wish I knew exactly what it was. You're right. It's sort of it's weird because my impressions of Lane. He was drafted in 2013, had a really good rookie year, and my sense of him, right from the start, he seems like a really bright kid, a nice guy, a really good guy. I mean, you can go talk to him about anything. He seems pretty honest and pretty open about talking about stuff, even if it's kind of controversial. Some guys don't want to get involved with that kind of stuff, but Lane's always willing to say what he thinks, and he's seems like a pretty bright, thoughtful kid. And then he got suspended the first time, and you look at the guy, who to be kind of smart and pretty aware of things, and basically gets suspended for using a prescription medication that turns out to be banned by the league and you can't use. And there have been some reports that it was Adderall, which is no longer been banned. So that happened. But they thought, okay, one-time mistake, it can happen. But this time around, it's been 2 years since that, and he's using a supplement that he bought online, and isn't sure what's in it, and it turns out to be something that he tests positive for. That all seems, it's not very encouraging. I mean, like I said, I think Lane's a really good guy. The Eagles have just invested a bunch of money in him. He's clearly a guy they put on counting on for the future. And then he does something like this, and you kind of go, that's just not what a smart person does. He's a smart guy. But, I know other people who are pretty smart normally, and every now and again they do something, and you kind of go, you're smart? that doesn't seem very smart. Well, the one problem with all this story, though, in terms of the story changing, is that, it kind of broke at a time when the NFL process should be going on behind closed doors. It's designed that way. It's meant to be secretive and, to protect players' rights to privacy, because if a guy, tests positive, but then it turns out that, it was a false positive and he's not suspended, there's not any kind of punishment. You don't think getting out if you can avoid it. That's part of the deal with the players and the league. So the fact that this all got out early, before this was, the way the system should work, the day that they announced the suspension is final is the day we should have found out about it. So that has caused a little bit of this. People are trying to talk about it. People who shouldn't really know about it but did know about it are trying to including the team, Harry Roseman, Doug Pederson, people like that. But Pederson talked about it right away when it first broke. Then, last day or two, he kind of said, no, I'm not talking about that anymore. So you have this kind of weird thing where people, because of the system, and somebody violated the basically the security of the system and the confidentiality of the system. Everybody's kind of left in a weird position. So it's been a very strange story, and really, from Lane's perspective, it's something that you really should not have allowed to happen.
Now, Phil, he was tested positive for what a substance called Adderall, which you said is no longer banned by the NFL. So with that, if his sample B does come back positive, will they take that in consideration, the NFL, that his first suspension really was not a violation, would not be a violation now? So this would be in effect really his first violation against the substance abuse policy.
Yeah, I don't know how it would go. I mean, I would imagine that's an argument that Johnson's lawyers or attorney or his agent, whoever's involved in that process, I'm sure that's an argument that they would make, that the first thing was a prescription medication. It's no longer banned. That shouldn't really be held against him. But the league's argument would be, this was the policy at the time. You violated it and got suspended. And if you violate the policy again, even if the policy might have changed in the intervening years, then you're still, subject to the longer suspension. That would be the two arguments, and it would be interesting to see, how a judge or somebody in a panel or some arbitrator would rule on that, because both arguments seem pretty valid. I mean, they're both reasonable arguments to make. So, to cost the guy 10 games of the season and a couple of $1 million probably overall when it's all added up, that seems like a pretty hefty punishment, especially when he used the NFLPA's app that is supposed to tell you whether a given supplement is approved or not, or is legal or not, and he did all those things. There's a lot of gray area in all this, and it's an unfortunate thing. There's all this gray area because the people who are trying to catch the cheaters have to follow rules and honor people's rights and all that stuff. Meanwhile, the cheaters don't have to follow anybody's rules. They just break any rule they want to while they're cheating. So all these rules are really complicated and convoluted, but they're a result of the cheaters having gotten ahead of the game for so long. So it's a complicated mess, and even Lane Johnson doesn't seem to think he has much chance of winning an appeal or anything. So they really need to kind of start thinking about this like they're not going to have them.
Phil, speaking of gray area, the Eagles, because of the Lane Johnson situation, are going to be even thinner on the offensive line. And then they decide to trade one of their backup offensive linemen in the middle of all this to improve their wide receiver core. So I want to get your reaction to the Eagles basically saying, well, to me, it looks like they value their wide receiver problems more than their offensive line problems.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I think some of it is, they kind of indicated they really believe that some of the young guys on the offensive line have the potential to play and to fill in a little bit. I mean, Dennis Kelly's a really good guy. He's been around for like 4 or 5 years now, survived the whole Chip Kelly era and all that stuff. But I don't think anybody thought Dennis Kelly was going to be, a starting offensive lineman for them, going down the road. Now, he's a guy you might need, with this whole Lane Johnson mess and Jason Peters gets hurt. But I think they have enough other guys that can do that job. Meanwhile, the wide receiving core, everybody had an opportunity going into this training camp to kind of, establish themselves, prove themselves. They could run this offense and be big play guys in it. And what you're seeing is the exact opposite. I mean, Nelson Aguilar does not look at all like, the guy that they hoped they were getting in the first round last year. Jordan Matthews is hurt now, the one reliable guy that they had. Ruben Randall does not look like he's, that invested in playing that hard, and especially in the preseason game. And Chris Givens pretty much vanished in that game, too. So all these guys that they were kind of hoping somebody would step up, nobody's stepping up. So I think they just think that they have enough bodies on the offensive line that they can get by with what they have left, even if Johnson is suspended and Peters gets hurt. And then there's the Will Beatty X factor. They may be planning to sign him and think he's going to come in and be their main backup at tackle, in which case Dennis Kelly would be even that much more expendable. So there are other factors in the works. But yeah, clearly the need for a wide receiver seems pretty pressing to them. They would not have made the trade.
What do you think that Dorial Green-Beckham's role is going to be on this team, considering that you brought in Chris Givens and they brought in Randall to help upgrade the receiver core, and now you bring in Green-Beckham? This is the third guy now who is not on the team last year, who they've brought in to try to help a wide receiver core that was leading the league last year in drops.
Yeah, well, that's the problem. I think in terms of Ruben Randall and Chris Givens, they brought in guys with a little experience, a little bit older than the group that they had, kind of hoping that one of those guys kind of emerge as a leader. Just the kind of thing that you do, as a football team. You get a guy that can play a little bit and also kind of set the standard. But now you're looking at how these guys have played and what they've done. I don't think anybody wants Ruben Randall kind of setting the tone for the wide receiving core. So they went out for a guy with just raw talent to see what they could make of him. But in Green-Beckham, when you have a guy that you need someone to lead, you don't need him. You're not bringing him in to be a leader. You're bringing him in to be led. So clearly, they're hoping somebody like Jordan Matthews can kind of establish himself as that leader and get his kid on the right track. But that's a big ask of a guy like Matthews, who is a great kid and a hard worker, does everything the right way. But he's still trying to find his own way in the league. I mean, getting 1,000 yards in a season, he came close last year, but he has not been that kind of a guy yet. This offense should allow somebody to emerge as a real legitimate wide receiver or as a number one guy. That's how this offense is designed. Not Chip Kelly's wasn't really, but Andy Reid's offense for all those years and this offense, which is based on that, they clearly meant to have one guy kind of be your number one guy. I don't know who that number one is going to be right now. It doesn't look like anybody. So I guess the hope is that if everything clicks and it comes together quickly with Green-Beckham, he could be that kind of guy. He's got the ability, the size, and the speed to be a guy that you can really rely on. But he hasn't shown it yet, and clearly in Tennessee they gave up on him for a backup offensive lineman. So, it's huge from both sides there. You can kind of see the Eagles, what the Eagles are hoping for and what Tennessee was hoping for and already kind of gave up on. So it's not the ideal fix, but at least it's a chance to fix the problem.
All right, so now, Phil, with the Eagles, with their receiving woes and not being able to find a true leader, someone that can catch the ball and have an outstanding year. Last year, Pederson had a history of running the ball. The Eagles are going to maybe try to do a little bit of that. I know Jamal Charles was hurt, and in your article you pointed out that the Chiefs won 10 consecutive games with a three-man crew, Spencer Ware and Davis. And I wonder, is Pederson going to start running the focus on running the ball more this year because that's his only other option?
I think he might. I mean, it's something that he's certainly has a history of doing and he likes to do and maybe forced to do, given the whole circumstance here. We haven't seen much of Darren Sproles because he's a veteran and they're not using him this early in the preseason and all that kind of thing. But when Pederson talks about Darren Sproles, you can kind of see his eyes light up a little bit because he's one of the few guys on that team you can look at and go, this guy can be a weapon in the NFL. This guy can actually make big plays, create something. So a guy like Darren Sproles could certainly become really useful, as a kind of small wide receiver, kind of running back, kind of a mix of roles. But getting him into pass routes and creating mismatches with linebackers or whoever's going to try to cover him, and hopefully get a guy like that going. But ultimately, the short passing game and the running game are going to be the keys to this whole offense, and it would help them a lot if one of these receivers could kind of step up and become a real difference.
We're talking with Phil Sheridan, writes over at ESPN.com. Phil, wrapping up a little bit, I want to ask you about what are some of the things that you think going forward the Eagles need to show us going into the second preseason game to possibly give us a little more confidence considering all the craziness that's been going on over the last several days?
Yeah, I think they need really steady offensive line play. I mean, what they got in the first game was the offensive line, the first team offense in general, but the offensive line in particular, we're not on the field long enough to show anything. So we didn't really get a sense of what that offense is going to look like at all from that game. So having the offensive line play well and consistently, including the backups when they get in there, have guys kind of play better than they did. They had a lot of pressure on their quarterbacks. And they got Chase Daniel sacked 4 times, and they got Carson Wentz hurt. So having that offensive line really just sort of, if they play most of the first half or whatever it is, that first group, have those guys go out there and look solid would be a big help and would really make a difference in terms of everything they're trying to do on offense. We didn't get enough of a look at the first team. Of course, one of the problems is we don't know exactly what the first team will look like because they tried moving Alan Barber out to right tackle, and Isaac Seumalo, the rookie third-round pick, is starting out left guard right now, and we don't know if that's going to be the lineup when they play Cleveland on September 11th or not. But again, getting that offensive line to actually look like a group and play solidly would go a long way towards solving some of these other problems. That and, again, there's a ton of the first-team defense, so seeing the defense continue to kind of make plays, if they can create some turnovers and you get a sense that they're going to be that kind of a unit that can, create some havoc out there, that would help a lot too. But, it's a pretty good team there to play, which helps, go against a good team and see what you got. And we should say a little bit more about the real Eagles because the guys who are going to actually play in the season are going to play a lot more tomorrow night.
We've been talking with Phil Sheridan. Phil, I appreciate you joining us today. I know that the announcement was made that you are no longer to be covering the Eagles for NFL Nation, but you will be transitioning to a new role at ESPN. So we wish you the best of luck in that, and we hope to have you on again as your new role is revealed.
Yeah, I appreciate it, guys.